So here we are, week 8, and this is a long one, so buckle up, kids. What we're dealing with is getting into the boat because some of you live in places where it's a lot warmer than Wisconsin, and it is definitely something we need to deal with. But keep in mind what your goal is, which is peacefully applying more power during the 340. So let's talk about cardio because we all love cardio at this point. Your goals for this week were 2 3-mile runs plus 1 4-miler, trying to keep your heart rate again under that 155. Bike about 45 minutes, swim about 30 minutes. And here we are into week 8, so we're just increasing to 2 4-mile runs and 1 3-mile run. So pretty straightforward. We're just adding that mile to another run. Once we get to that 4-mile foundation, that's when things will start to change. With bike, I'm looking at 45 to 60 minutes, give or take. You want to push your heart rate a little bit up to 145, maybe a little higher, depending on your condition. Swim, 30 to 40 minutes. We're probably not going to go much beyond 40 minutes. I know that some people will swim for 2 miles and that sort of thing. That's fantastic, but that's not really what I'm expecting here because what we're doing here, this cardio, is developing your cardiac system, but also this is going to act as cross-training. And consequently, you don't want your cross-training to become the majority of what you're doing. You want it to be that, cross-training, recovery from what is important. We also have to deal with core real briefly. At this point, you've been doing your Supermans and your crossover crunches, and you should be around 4 sets of 15 at this point. Now, you are shooting for 6x20, and you should be doing that at least twice a week. Now, let's move on to the main attraction, getting in the boat. And this is roughly what it will look like getting in the boat for me in Wisconsin. So, what do you have to think about? And I'm basing this on my own experience. I realize some of you live in warmer climes where some of these are simply not issues. First of all, first paddles of the season, you have to deal with cold. Cold shock is a real thing. Honestly, cold shock is more terrifying to me than hypothermia. Hypothermia takes time. If I'm in a narrow river, I can get to shore. I'm okay. But the cold shock is going to be the issue, and that's when you hit water under 50 degrees and your body goes into shock, and this can cause heart attacks. This can cause a lot of different issues. You're going to be very disoriented. So you want to make sure that you're dressing for the temperature, for immersion. So if you hit the water, are you going to be okay? So when it's cold, you definitely want to wear a PFD. If you have a dry suit or a wet suit as appropriate, you should be wearing it. Kind of keep all this in mind as you go out there. I wouldn't go out in a tippy boat if ice has just come off the body of water that you're on. Second, inspect your equipment. A lot of things can happen. You don't want to be in the middle of a lake when you realize that a whole colony of spiders has decided that the underside of your canoe seat is a brilliant place to hang out, and it's now nice and warm because you've been sitting on it for an hour and they're all crawling all over you. Yes, this is why you want to at least look at the equipment, make sure everything's still in good order from last year. You'd be shocked at the amount of equipment that gets put away with minor issues after the 340 and then doesn't get looked at again until the next season. Scout your paddle. Now up here, I do a lot of river paddling. The majority of my training will be on a river. And that river has some low bridges, so in floodwater that becomes a significant issue. There could be flooding. There could still be ice on parts of the river. There's a lot of possibilities. There's also, because I'm on a river, there are log jams and things that develop over the year. So make sure that you get out and do what you can to look at it before you're in the boat and facing a situation you don't want to be in. So let's talk about the first trip. There are 2 trips I'll talk about specifically, your first time in the boat and your second time in the boat. The first time in the boat, usually a shakedown cruise. 4 to 5 miles, I'm not going to be pushing it much. It's basically getting used to being on the water again. Also testing out your fancy new equipment, because we've all bought fancy new equipment by the time we get out there the first time. We've been stocking up on cool new stuff all winter. We want to use it. So you're kind of testing that out. You're not really pushing yourself too hard. Don't crank off intervals at this point. Just take your time, get used to the paddle stroke, especially if you've been on an ergometer. You're going to have to get used to a regular paddle stroke again. Your second cruise is really testing yourself. You want to crank up the speed a little bit and try and hold the fastest cruise speed you can. And usually I'll do that on flat water. It's just kind of a test of where I stand that year. Now, if something starts to hurt, please stop. The second trip, when I'm testing myself, I usually use a lake or somewhere where I know that my exit point is within a mile or so. I can always limp back if something goes wrong. But this is the most likely time that you're going to do something. You're going to damage a shoulder or something like that. So don't crank off too much. You definitely want to increase that cruise speed though. You want to get your joints, your shoulders, your body used to that motion again. Now, one of the pieces of equipment I believe you need is a cheap GPS. I use a simple Garmin, very similar to the one pictured there. You can pick these up for $50 to $100, and all I have on it is my distance, my current moving speed, and my average speed. And that's it. Those are the only numbers I ever look at. I never use it for a map. But it allows me to track very accurately how far have I gone, how quickly, what were my averages. You could, in today's day and age, do this with a cell phone as well, with Strava or some of those programs that turn your phone into a functioning GPS. That would be perfectly fine. But you want metrics, you want numbers to track, because that way you can continuously improve. So in terms of progression, what am I looking at? Now this is a lot looser because this will form up into something more later. After the first 2 trips, I'm looking for 1 long day per week, starting at 1 hour, adding time and speed each week, a goal of about 2.5 to 3 hours. Now you might start at 2 hours, and that's perfectly fine. Again, this is being written for a rookie, a beginner, someone who hasn't been in a boat much. Your other goal is 2 short days, 5 to 6 mile minimum. Now this could be 4 mile minimum. I'm looking for about an hour here. Those short days will become intervals. But first, you have to get used to being in the boat before we stress you with sprinting. And we will be dealing with intervals next week. So something to look forward to. Now, in terms of schedule, because some of you are probably sitting there going, well, what am I supposed to do here? My idea is that you continue your cardio and you're just going to add the paddle into it. So, for example, Mondays would be an interval short paddle day. Tuesday would be a run. Wednesday, short paddle. Friday, paddle and run. That's the infamous long day, another one that we'll be dealing with shortly. And then Saturday, off day, Sunday, run. And then you would add your core and strength routine in there, 2 days, maybe 3 days per week. That Friday long day is going to turn into a brutal session, and how brutal it becomes will be entirely up to you. But next week we will deal with the intervals, and then on the following week we'll deal with core, and then probably week 11 or so we will deal with the long day, because we have some work to get there. After all, we're just trying to get you to the end of the race and get you to the end of the race in good shape. I would love to see a race where everyone is in the kind of shape where there are almost no DNFs, where everyone can handle whatever conditions are out there. So, if you have any questions, comments, concerns, quarrels, qualms, quandaries, curse words, please leave them in the comments below. Otherwise, this is 340 Paddler, hoping that you keep your paddle in the water.